Soos genoem gesels ek vanoggend met Justin Chadwick en hy is die president van die Sitruskwekers vereniging. Justin, welcome to GROOTplaas.
Morning, Mia. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, I hope you're doing well. Tell me about the European Union pest control rules. Now, what should we know at the moment?
So we have a pest called false codling moth that's prevalent only in Africa, so it's not found in the rest of the world. It's found on a wide range of host material, including citrus. And obviously the EU are concerned. They don't want to get that pest into their domestic citrus orchards. So there are requirements that we have to go through. There have been requirements since 2018 when this pest became a quarantine pest. And we have a systems approach that was developed then to ensure that there's no FCM in our consignments.
Yes.
And that was working really well. The number of FCM interceptions were dropping each year. And it was actually lauded around the world as being one of the best systems around in terms of pest control. Unfortunately, the EU, through political pressure and looking after their protecting their own interests, implemented new rules last year, interim rules to start off with in June last year, and those have been strengthened this year in January. And it's really totally unnecessary, the strengthening and, in fact, even the interim measures. And as a result, we need to cool the fruit down more, and we simply don't have the infrastructure available to do that, and hence the drop in the volumes that we anticipate we will sell in 2020.
Now, if you can maybe paint me a picture, obviously, since these new regulations have been put in place, I presume that it's been quite South African farmers, that the struggle is real. And what exactly is the direct impact for South African citrus farmers?
Yeah, I think maybe we can dial back a bit and look at all the challenges that growers have faced. Last year, for sure, the biggest impact on our industry was the freight rates, shipping costs, the cost of shipping fruit to the different markets. Unfortunately, the shipping lines just increased those rates to levels that were uneconomic. Done by the Bureau of Food and Agriculture Policy show that 4 out of 5 citrus farmers made a loss last year, and a large portion of that loss was due to these elevated shipping costs. And so this year is really a survival year. We need to be able to turn that around and have 5 out of 5 farmers making a profit in 2023. Otherwise, their future is in jeopardy. And so, the imposition of these new rules couldn't have come at a worse time. So what it actually means is that the fruit comes down and it goes into cooling. Now, I mean, as a normal process, we do cool a lot of our fruit, but not down to 2 degrees, which is now what is required. So the interim measures were down to 5 degrees, and it's now down to 2 degrees. And what that means is you need what's called forced air cooling. So you can't just bring the pellets into a cold room and they get cool over time through the cool air just moving through the pellet. You've actually got to force the cool air into the pellets to get it down to that 2 degrees. And that's the problem. We simply don't have the infrastructure, the amount of forced air cooling chambers around the country to be able to do the volume of oranges that we send to the EU. This rule is on oranges, not on the other citrus types. But oranges is our largest volume from all the citrus, more than 50 of citrus oranges.
Now, we've seen the news headlines the past week or so. Would you say there is a citrus crisis or an orange crisis looming at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, crisis is quite
a dramatic word. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're hopeful that through the work of the growers and the cold stores that we'll be able to cool as much as we possibly can. So it's unknown, because they're new measures, unknown exactly what the impact will be, and we're only getting now into our into our orange season. So that's still, to be seen. I guess, in a way, it is a crisis in that for those individual growers who simply cannot get their fruit cooled, it will be for them possibly mean that they've got to relook at their business. So it is a serious matter, and fortunately the government is assisting. Towards the end of last year, Minister Patel did file a dispute at the WTO. Unfortunately, that just seems to have gone nowhere. The first step in that is consultations, which have been taking place since the end of last year and have been ongoing. And we know Minister Didiza brought it up in June again at the EU ministerial meetings. It just seems that that the protectionism in the EU is so strong that they aren't interested in listening to the technical justification that we have for these different measures that we would like to apply, and with the same, if not elevated, risk protection against the pest.
Justin, my logic just tells me that let's say if regulations like this are implemented and it's a situation where it just can't be met. I mean, there's certain factors that just makes it almost impossible for some of the farmers. I'm sure that there are a lot of heated discussions going on around this topic at the moment, right?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we're a bit appalled at the behaviour of the EU because we're meant to be a strategic partner to them, and as such, we're meant to be trading openly and freely, and obviously any new rules need to be technically justified. So there is a lot of heat around, and growers are concerned about their future at the moment. With this EU issue, with load shedding around the country. I mean, recently the burning of trucks, which we're getting into the heavy part of our season. So a lot of our fruit is transported from the north down to Durban, and we've got this wanton criminality on our roads now, and the government needs to step in and take control, because at the moment the industry is, as I mentioned earlier, sort of in survival mode, and we really need to turn that around this year.
Justin, how does South Africa rank as an exporter of citrus to the world at the moment? And you can explain quite in detail, because I'm sure it's a big contribution.
Yeah, so South Africa is the second biggest exporter in the world. We export 2.5 million tons of fruit. That's 165 million boxes of fruit, 15-kilogram boxes. So it's a massive industry, and there's a real huge volume of fruit sent overseas. One must also remember that the biggest exporter is actually Spain, and 90% of their product goes to Europe. So in other words, it's just goes across the border. It's like us selling it into Zimbabwe or Mozambique. So we're the biggest long distance exporter by a long way. I mean, most of our fruit goes to the EU. It takes anything up to 2 weeks to get into the market. So it's a huge big machine that keeps this fruit produced and packed and marketed overseas. In the southern hemisphere, we dominate the southern hemisphere citrus season. In terms of grapefruit, we're the only grapefruit exporter. In terms of lemons, it's just us in Argentina. In terms of oranges, we're probably 50% of the oranges, and the most competitive is in mandarins, where we do have competition from South America, particularly Peru, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay. So it is a big industry. We employ about 140,000 people on the farms and in the pack houses. It excludes employment in the transport sector, in the warehousing sector, and the ports, etc. So that would add a lot more employment. It's the biggest employer of labour in the agricultural space. And it brings in about 30 billion rand a year in foreign exchange earnings. So it's the biggest export earner in the agriculture sector as well. So it's a massive machine.
In the beginning, I did mention that there are around 20% of, less orange exports that's going to go to Europe. So if we look at stats like that at the moment, what are some of the stats that are just quite worrying as you see it in a spreadsheet at the moment?
Yeah, so the 80,000 tons would equate to about 500 million rand that might be lost. People ask, could you not just divert that fruit to other markets? It's not so easy because other markets are pretty full as it is. It's not as if there's a whole lot of new markets out there that we can send the fruit to. We are working very hard with the Department of Agriculture around market access because that's really the future, is to open up new markets. So we do have big projects going to try and open up the rest of, the US for the rest of South Africa. We've got projects going to try and change the import requirements into India, into Japan. We have an access application into Vietnam that's been going for a while now. So with the Department of Agriculture and with DTRC and DevCo, we're working hard on these different markets so that if you do have a shock like this in one market, you can divert the fruit to another market, and it isn't as painful. But the other factor is that the fruit itself, different markets take different size fruit, different specifications, different color, etc. And so it's pretty specific fruit that goes into the EU. A lot of that fruit goes into their fruit juicing machines, so it's got to be a certain size to fit into those vending machines in the different retailers, etc. Fortunately, we produce a lot of that fruit, so we've got fruit in the right specs for those different markets, hopefully we won't have as big an impact as we sort of foreseeing, but we'll know that in the next couple of weeks because we're now getting really starting into our Valencia season, which is our big volume. We'll see what happens with those volumes.
So seeing we are in this situation at the moment, what, according to you, what would you like the next step forward to be? Is it just what it is, or are there plans to try and counter this?
So the first step in the WTO process is the consultations, and everybody hopes that those bear results. Our compromise would be to go back to the interim measure. And the interim measure actually worked perfectly. Since the interim measure was implemented, there have been no interceptions for FCM. So that would be our first prize, is if we could go back to that. In fact, we'd like to go back to the systems approach, but we realize that might be a bridge too far for the EU. But as I've mentioned, the consultations seem to be going nowhere. So we have now asked the Minister Patel to look at requesting the formation of a panel. So that's the next step in the WTO process, where the WTO then forms a panel of experts, and they consider inputs from both parties to see who's right and who's wrong. So that's what we're asking for now, because we can't continue with these consultations forever if they're actually not getting us anywhere. Unfortunately, the panel process is a long process. It's probably about an 18-month process, so there won't be any immediate relief from the panel process, but at least it does put us onto a timeline, and we can then see that we're getting towards some sort of resolution around this issue.
Just finally, I just want to hear from your side. We've got around 1 minute left. Just some words of encouragement from your side to citrus farmers currently sitting in the situation. Any good news?
Yeah, I mean, farmers are incredibly resilient, and the things can turn around. If we come to some resolution, particularly if the economics of citrus farming improve, we've got the volumes coming. We show through our long-term model that we're going to go up to 260 million cartons in 10 years' time if all conditions are favorable. So there's a bright future. We just need to have certain things put in place and certain things to fall in line and a bit better luck in the future. And then the industry is on a really good footing.
Well, here. Justin, thank you for your time this morning. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Mia.
Dankie dat jy ingeskakel het. Bly net daar, die groot ontbytspan gaan jou om 6:00 vanoggend groet. Ek en jy sien mekaar môre weer. Ek hoop is 'n goeie een. Totsiens.